Hello and welcome to On the Job with Bob. I'm Julie Robinson in the Community Professional and Economic Development Department, and we're glad that you are getting the opportunity to see the Jackson County Extension Center. So Dr. Scott, we're really excited to be able to capture some footage today that folks are going to get to watch. And we're going to highlight all the great things that are going on here at the Jackson County Extension Center.
I know we've made a big deal out of this, but it is kind of a big deal. We've got a new building up here. I just want people to know the work that goes on here, and when you pick up one of those MPs, the MP44 like the one I used to have and the others, that data really came from somewhere.
Right.
You know, it's not just made up, it's not an opinion, it's real. And so this is one of our main locations where just the Extension Service, for the most part, does research at.
Awesome. Well, we're going to get to visit with several folks here in just a little bit, but before we do, we're going to get a real quick extension update. And so really, I think the only thing we've got are a couple of items. First is the Assistant Vice President for Family and Consumer Sciences.
Yes, so spoiler alert. While we're recording, the interviews are ongoing. We're right in the middle of that process right now. We've had 2 of the interviews are in the bag, and hopefully people are going online. Mm-hmm. There's a time limit on that. Exactly. Hopefully they went online and entered their...
Right, they're only letting the recordings be available for 3 days.
3 days afterwards. Yeah. So by now, hopefully that's done. By the time this is aired, we will have interviewed all 3 candidates. Right. And we'll be looking at all the feedback and all the deliberations and looking at the committee recommendations and stuff like that. And we'll try to make a decision as quick as we can.
Okay. And so the other big administrative position is the Extension Director search. And right now it's just really in the beginning stages.
It's in the early stages. The committee's met. And I think they've set some goals for on into the fall for interviews. And I told Dr. Fields that I'm going to, continue to perform the duties of this office. I'm looking forward to my opportunities after that, but we'll see what the future holds on that.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to more On the Job with Bob for a little bit longer. All right. Well, now we're going to get into really the reason that we're out here today. And so we're at the Jackson County Extension Center. If you haven't been here before, we're right on Highway 67, 167, and a future interstate, so you can hear some of the vehicles going by.
We decided just to go with it.
Right. Well, it's a really great location, but to tell us a little bit more about Jackson County Extension and the facility, we're going to invite Matthew Davis, who is the Jackson County Ag Agent and Staff Chair.
Dr. Scott, a pleasure.
Here, you want
Do a fist bump,
to
Julie. That'll work.
Oh, welcome, Matthew.
Well, how's it going, everybody?
Good. Well, we're really excited because even for us, this feels like it's been a long time in the making.
Has been, yeah. I've been here 6 years, 8 months, and some odd days according to Workday, so it's easier to keep up with now. I can just go, here it is. One good thing about Workday.
Well, we're going to talk about the center here in just a little bit, but why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the work you do here in Jackson County?
So for myself, I'm the Ag Agent, Staff Chair, and we do a little community economic development, a little bit of everything. It's one of those jobs, a little bit of, you don't know what you're getting into till you get to the office that day and answer the phone calls and see what happens. But for the most part, my job from the Staff Chair standpoint, I have 3 staff members under me that you'll get to meet a little later on, and they're all great. They do their job top notch, so I can be out in the field when I need to be. So I would like to say I'm always here every single day, making sure everything's done right. But as a staff chair, I'm very fortunate. I get to leave the office, still perform my ag duties to the best of my ability, and I know the office is okay and safe at all times. There's never a situation, never a concern there. I think they're one of the best teams in the state, but I may be a little biased in that sense. So
well, that's okay.
What about this area that we're sitting in out here?
Yeah,
tell us a little bit about this.
This is pretty nice.
We chose to be outside.
Chose to be outside in this situation. So this was one of my, when Dr. Scott was here many moons ago and put the bug in my ear that he wanted a new building, all these new things, 4-H programs, different kind of things like that. At the time, we didn't have a very good 4-H program. We were struggling. So I started looking at ways I can involve the station, the center as a whole into our 4-H programming. And that's kind of how this area came to be. We had some funding come up. The Jackson County Quorum Court chipped in. We had some other funding come about, and we built this outdoor skills area. So this is the first phase of the outdoor skills area. We're sitting in the outdoor cooking area, so we have fire pits and seating and Dutch ovens and different things. So we'll be able to teach some of the stuff that Corinna Bosnick's doing. Her and Jesse's came up several times during this process and advised me on how to set these things up. So I think long term this is going to be not just for Jackson County, but for Northeast Arkansas. We're going to have a growing 4-H programmability. So if people can't travel maybe to the 4-H center, we can hold some agent trainings or 4-H trainings here in Northeast Arkansas at this station.
Well, and I like this little area. These even turn into the backs.
Flip them down.
Flip them down and then make a table. Yeah.
So we can actually educate. We'll make them do a little pencil work, old school style. So
tell us a little bit about the facility behind us.
So the facility behind us, the Arkansas Corn and Grain Sorghum Producers Building, is a long-term goal that's finally hit almost to the end of the run. You know, we've already had several meetings, both internal and external meetings here. We've held production meetings, we've held grower meetings, we've held Arkansas Corn and Grain Sorghum Board held their meeting here. We've had a few. Jennifer James had one of her meetings here for her soybean producers. So it's becoming a hot spot. This, like you had mentioned, I-57 being out here in the future, this interstate system, it's easy. You can hop off, get on, get here, explain how to get here, and people are going to utilize in that function. So for me, you know, when I hired this new agent position we just added, that was one of my draws to get the Corn Corps to chip in their portion of the money. I was like, we're giving back tenfold with this facility that you're going to give us with that money. And I think that was a big point of contention. I wouldn't have got this position without having this leverage in the center and Dr. Barber and everybody being on top of it and making sure we kind of could give that security to the county and say, we're investing, we need you to invest back in us.
And we're in a particular county and area of the state where there's not a lot of facilities to have meetings. It's always been a challenge.
Yeah.
All right, so Matthew, why don't you walk me through a little bit of the process from initial funding to having a completed project?
Well, it all starts with a dream, and then it kind of goes from there. But the funding, you know,
very inspirational.
Yeah, very inspirational. But the funding kind of kicked in when Dr. Cartwright kind of come to us and said, "Here's where we're at. We're going to have some money available. Let's try to get this ball rolling and see where it ends up." But you know, in those conversations, you know, we've realized we needed additional funding and things came on board. So the Arkansas Corn and Grain Sorghum Board chipped in, you know, $250,000. Then we had the Jackson County Corn Corps chipped in $5,000 for this outdoor skills area, and then another $25,000 or another $20,000 on top of that $25,000 total, and wanted to help support the building getting finished off. And a lot of that stuff came down to those finishing touches like an audio video system, all those kind of things. It's high ticket items that when you're trying to plan a budget to get a building built, you're not worried about, well, does it have all the audio video right now? You got to get the building up and a roof over it and air conditioning in it, because I'm not going to stay in a hot building. So those are the critical items, and you kind of check off the list. But, you know, a lot of it, Dr. Scott was, you know, he was the one that really put the initial, like, drop in the hat, like, we need to do something up here. This station needs it, and that kind of led to what we are today. And then, you know, it's good to see him back here and seeing it, and I'm glad to be a part of trying to get that dream to come to that end goal, because for myself in this position, wanting to, you know, remain here long term or in this county and in the division as a whole, you know, this is something I know 10, 15 years down the road is still going to be a viable building, whereas the older facility and then across the state, other facilities, you know, you start having to think about maintenance, upkeep, all these things. So now we're kind of starting with a fresh slate here in 2023. So at least the next 10 to 15, 20 years, I have that security, and it's a nice feeling to have it. So
awesome. Well, you talked about A&R and community development, but tell us a little bit about your FCS programming and your 4-H programming, and maybe introduce us to your team, because this isn't a one-man show.
It's not a one-man show. Sometimes I try to act like it, just to get them stirred up. You got to keep your team a little hot, a little aggravated at you sometime, or it's not near as fun. But like I said, my team's top notch. Our FCS program's been growing since we brought Joy West in, and now we have Sarah Gaskin on board with Sarah Dickerson. Gaskin, if you're looking for her, she's Gaskin, but on the email, but she's just been married and then got Darlene Madden. So I'm gonna bring them in, let them come in here and kind of put a face to the name. But these programs are still in their infancy. In some cases, our 4-H program definitely is in their infancy. And but we got a person that's a former 4-H state officer, has the know-how and the want to, and is encouraged to get it done. So I think it'll be a great thing. So if you don't know, to my left here is Miss Joy West. Miss Sarah Gaskin, here in the middle, Sarah Dickerson. I keep saying Gaskin because in the email, if you're looking for her, you ain't gonna find her under Dickerson, but she is married, Miss Sarah Dickerson. And then Miss Darlene Madden here behind me, she's been in I seen her at a production meeting in another county, and I roped her into coming back to work for me because I needed somebody who was actually pretty good and could handle things, so we were trying to get it done. So I think, without this team, I couldn't do the job I do day in, day out, because I'd be stuck in the office answering phone calls and just monotony of that part of it. And so without this team is, like I said, top notch, no better one, and all the other counties can just be mad at me for saying it, I guess. So let's call it out.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right? I think you've got a pretty good team. Well, thank y'all all so much for joining us this morning and kind of introducing us to Jackson County Extension and telling us a little bit about your programming. And I think at this point, we're going to actually head on out to the field, and we're going to meet with Dr. Tom Barber, who is the center director and works pretty closely with Matthew and his staff. So, Dr. Barber, you are a professor, extension weed scientist, and director of the Jackson County Extension Center. So, you are doing a lot of things, and I want to talk to you about most of those things. Okay. But we're going to split them up a little bit. So, why don't you start off by telling us about your role as the director for the Jackson County Extension Center?
Okay, well, about 5 years ago, when Dr. Scott moved up into the administration ranks, I had the opportunity to fill his shoes as the director of the Jackson County Extension Center. And so we have about 400 acres up here that are tillable, but we only farm, I say they're tillable, we only farm about 300 of it, and there's probably research on only about 100 of it. Okay. And if you want to look at, check the website out, we have a website that talks a little bit about the center here, but it is an old World War II Air Force base, and so runways take up a lot of the acreage as well. And so we have little corners and runways that take up some of the space.
Okay, so it's got a very unique history.
Right, very unique, yeah.
Well, so what makes this center special or beneficial for extension in the division?
Well, it's got a real good director, so that's important. It's important you start with that's key to any good center. I just think it's in a good area. We have a tremendous amount of support from local growers in the community in the area. Got a good county agent staff here who have a new building I think that y'all are going to show a little later, or have already shown on previous on the job with Bob sets. So we're just excited to be here and provide what we can information-wise to the growers in this part of the state.
Yeah, I think it's really the location, honestly, because y'all are just right off of 67-167. I've come here for a lot of meetings myself. Right,
yeah, and we've, like with the new facility that we have now, I believe it's going to be a hot spot for meetings moving forward, and so a lot of outreach potential.
So, you mentioned me before as director, and Julie's actually holding in her hands, strangely enough, the whole reason that Extension has this center up here, and that's because I was looking, many years ago, I was looking for a place to do research on pigweed. Palmer pigweed, to be specific, that was resistant, and it just so happened they had a bunch of it up here.
Yeah, so you're not taking the blame for all of them being here now?
Nope.
Okay.
They were already here, right?
They're already here.
Already here. Well, it's definitely our #1 weed in upland crops, and even some of our, especially our row rice acres now. Pigweed has become our #1 nemesis, and we probably need to hire some better weed scientists because we hadn't figured out a way to get rid of it yet. So it keeps dodging all the bullets we throw at it.
Well, so that brings up a good point. We talked about you're an extension weed scientist. So in your work and your research, what do you do and how do you utilize the center here?
Well, and so we're standing in front of actually a newer combine that we purchased recently, and it has a unique tool on the back end of it called a seed destructor. This particular unit's made in Canada. They first became real popular in Australia because the Australian farmers didn't have an answer for Italian ryegrass, or rigid ryegrass actually over there. And so herbicides didn't work anymore. They start using seed destructor at harvest to remove any extra seed that's left when they harvest their wheat crop. So same principle here. We're standing in front of a long-term study that we've had planned for about 4 years now. So this is at the end of its life, if you will, from a study standpoint, but this is a coordination with funds from the Arkansas Soybean Promotion Board and some USDA NIFA grants that Dr. Norsworthy's been a part of, and so which enabled us to purchase this seed destructor, number one, and two, put in this long-term study to focus on the effect of destructing pigweed seed.
And you mentioned these are resistant pigweed, and they're becoming resistant to just about every herbicide we have. So looking at these cultural practices is kind of where we're at as far as trying to diminish those populations. And I remember Dr. Jeremy Ross, who we're also going to talk to on our tour of the center here. You know, we did narrow row spacing, and it was a cultural practice to try to get the canopy quicker over the pigweed. So we're running, you know, when you run out of herbicide options, you got to look at other things.
Well, and I think the holistic approach is, we're not saying we won't be able to use herbicides in this system, but it just helps us manage the seed bank. And that's, if you look at the field behind us, all the pigweed are there because of the seed that was put there the year before. And so we're at the end of the season of our study here, and so we're counting pigweed plants, and then next year we'll start cleaning up that field.
Well, and we know that pigweed, whether, you know, it's the research and doing all the counting or just kind of trying to control it, is very labor intensive, and you've got a pretty good team that you work with.
Oh, absolutely. And we couldn't do any of this without our program associates, program technicians, Alan Honey, Nathan Payrow up here, Aaron Ross, Leah Colley, Ryan Doherty, Zach Hill that work for me, and then Troy Dillon, and Dr. Tommy Butts has a lot of research up here as well in weed control. So.
Awesome. Well, Dr. Barber, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to share with us about the Jackson County Extension Center and your research as an extension weed scientist. We appreciate your time.
I'm excited y'all are here. Thank y'all for coming to let us showcase some of this work.
And we're headed now to go see.
We're going to go see Dr. Travis Foskey
Look
and
at some
find out what
peanuts.
he's doing.
All right.
Dr. Foskey, so you're a professor, a plant pathology specialist, and director of the Lone Oak Extension Center. But so you wear a lot of hats, but today we're going to talk more specifically about your research out here at the Jackson County Extension Center.
Sure. So as a plant pathologist, I study plant diseases, whether it be caused by fungi or nematodes, and try to look at some of the ways we can mitigate yield losses to those, whether it's a nematicide, fungicide, or different varieties. And so we need to test those in the field, right? And so kind of to get an idea of how susceptible they are or how effective they are. If I have a nematode problem, I almost have to go to a nematode field. Right. And we do that for some of our research. But here, the benefit for me is that I can actually inoculate these plots with particular fungi. So we grow the fungi on millet, let that go for a couple of weeks in the lab, and then bring it out here at the right time to inoculate the plots, and then come back and evaluate either by digging the roots or assessing what they look like. Some of the diseases will actually show symptoms, and we can actually measure those.
Okay, so for those of us that don't know maybe a whole lot about plant pathology, so why is it important to maybe keep your inoculum here?
Yeah,
as opposed to cooperating with a farmer, because we have a lot of fantastic farmer cooperators.
Right, and so sometimes the best disease I see is in farmers' fields, but every time I've set up a trial there for that particular disease, something doesn't happen right. So for any disease, you need the right host, the pathogen, and the environment. So one of those things does not work. Here, I'm blocking off that triangle to make sure I've got the host and the pathogen. And probably the biggest thing is, Julie, is I would hate to put a fungal pathogen into a farmer's field. They would have a lifelong problem with that particular disease, and that's not a good idea.
That does not make happy
No.
cooperators.
And so here, since this is university research plots, we can, and we do that almost every year to ensure that we have disease and to ensure that whatever we're evaluating, we can share back with those farmers, like, yeah, this fungicide worked good, or this variety you would want to select over this variety if you have this disease.
I assume that having this site, another benefit is you have complete control over it. So you can irrigate it as often as you want. You can inoculate, like you said, all you want, and you don't have to worry about something happening to your trial.
Yes, and there's you've worked on farmers' fields too, and things happen in farmers' field. Even this year too, we've had loss of a plot or two because of that.
Right.
But you're right, and so with the center pivot back there, then for disease, one thing I need is the right environment. So I can overwater. Now a farmer would not want to do that, but I can promote that environment for that disease development to try to trigger it to be, because I'm trying to make disease happen, and it sounds simple, but it's actually a little more difficult than it sounds.
All right, so the peanuts will come off of the nodes and they'll actually grow underground. So what's that harvest process look like?
So once they're mature, these will stay in the ground from planting to harvest about 150 days, but then they'll actually dig all the peanuts up. So they'll dig them and invert them and basically turn them upside down. And that's why you want really sandy soil, so all the sand falls off and doesn't stick to the peanut. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
gotcha.
And some soil will clump, and they can actually clean that at the buying point. Okay. But then after about 3 to 5 days of field drying, getting to as low moisture as possible, less than 20%, they'll come in and combine those.
Okay, so that's pretty labor intensive.
It's very labor intensive from start to finish, and then the different evaluation times that you have.
And Travis does that all himself.
Yeah, so I'm assuming there's a team involved.
There's a team involved, so just some of those that really have an impact here at the station. Michael Emerson does a great job of getting a lot of the seed together that we plant, organizing the planting. Brandon Baker's taking lead on the peanuts, so each one of those plots back there with peanuts, there's about 600, will be sprayed 4 times this year. Yeah, it's a lot, yes. And so then we'll go and evaluate those afterwards as well. In all the inoculum we use, the southern blight for peanuts or the sclerotinia blight or the taproot decline for soybeans is all made in the lab at the Lone Oak Extension Center by Catherine Brown. And so that team effort is what makes this successful.
Awesome. Well, I and all peanut lovers who like to enjoy those foods. Thank you for all of your work on the research and your team as well. But thank you also for joining us this morning. I know it's a busy time of year for y'all and visiting with us.
I'm glad you guys came out. I'm glad you got to see it. You picked a great day to come out.
Yeah, awesome.
Who are we going to go see next?
So next we're going to go see Dr. Jeremy Ross and see what he's been up to. So Dr. Ross, you're a professor and soybean agronomist, and I recognize the plants behind us. Those are soybeans. I've seen those. They're not new to me like the peanuts were. But before we dive off into your research here at Jackson County Extension Center, tell us a little bit more about your work in general across the state.
Sure. So I consider myself kind of the hub for soybean research in the division and production across the state. Any given year, we have over 3 million acres of soybeans, which, acreage wise, that's the largest row crops that we have. It is the big one.
So you stay busy.
Really busy. And so with farmer calls and trying to do the research that I conduct, here on the station and other locations, it really keeps me and my crew busy during the summer.
So before, I also want to ask, just for judgment, are these good looking soybeans?
Really good looking soybeans. So these were planted about mid-May. What we're actually looking at behind us is our variety testing program that's conducted at the university. So there's about 140 different individual varieties out there. And so we have these across multiple locations across the state to give farmers a better indication of how those varieties are going to perform under different soil textures and then different environmental conditions. So this is probably one of the bigger studies that we have in the division on soybeans, across the whole division.
So Jeremy, I know you do work, you just said all over the state. Is there anything particular about the Jackson County Center that you like, that there's a reason you do work up here?
Well, so I was talking to Dr. Barber earlier, and so we kind of determined, I think I've been up here since 2010. And so about 13 years been on this station. I did work with a farmer closer to Weiner, but this soil texture here kind of, representative of several counties here in, north central Arkansas. And so the data we get off of here is representation of several counties that we have, in the general area. So soil texture is really good, fertility is really good. Sometimes we have some issues trying to get, fertility low enough to try to do some fertility work here. but you know, this is, you know, probably my main location. Also do stuff at several other research stations, do some on-farm stuff as well. But you know, I've kind of made this my home location.
And so everybody might not understand, you have all these locations around the state, so any farmer that comes in, you can match a location to his soil type, geography.
Yep.
You can kind of tailor, and you get different results from
That's
these
right.
varieties
Oh,
on these
absolutely.
different places.
You got some varieties and some production practices that work well on, you know, a silt loam soil versus a clay soil. So we try to do research across multiple locations just to try to get as many answers for our farmers that we can across the state.
Right. So you're doing a lot of different, you know, hitting on a lot of different areas. What are some of the more significant kind of findings that you've discovered through your research here that has been beneficial for farmers?
So here, I'm fortunate enough that our national soybean agronomist group has been doing some national projects the last several years. And so again, this is kind of a location where we do that research. We're looking at biological products that, you know, a lot of the data that we're looking at, there's not, you know, it's not big bells and whistles and fireworks going off. A lot of it's just minor, you know, increases in yield or no increases in yield, you know, for a lot of the time. And so we've gotten a lot of our national projects here, looking at biologicals, looking at nitrogen, sulfur, fertility. We've done, you know, row spacing, seeding rate. We also look at edamame, which is kind of a unique crop for Arkansas. We've got, you know, roughly 2,000 acres of edamame in the state. And so we do some variety testing here and then some edamame research as well on this station.
So you mentioned only about 2,000 acres of edamame versus the 3 million.
Yeah, over 3 million.
Yeah. So are we increasing that? Because I have a very vested interest in that. I like edamame.
Well, we're hoping to, but you know, there's some bottlenecks with the company on the processing line, and so they are in the process of trying to increase the production.
So I know for a fact you don't do all this work by yourself. Is there anyone you want to give a shout out to or thank?
You know, especially my crew, Randy Miller and Rollins Elam, they do all the work, hard labor. I got to ride the planter a little bit this winter or this spring, but they let me. And then on the station, Alan Honey and then especially Nathan Payrow for all the help that they do here on the station. So,
well, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and to everybody in the division today.
Yep, I've been wanting to get on the job with Bob, and I finally got my chance. So.
All right. Well, Dr. Ross, thank you so much for taking time to join us today. And Dr. Scott, now we're going to do your favorite part, and that's shout outs.
All right. I want to start the shout outs out this time. I want to give you a shout out, but not just you. I want to give a shout out to all the future ag leaders who were on the Arkansas Future Ag Leaders Tour. I got to speak to them. It's always a great group, and I feel like they learn a lot in that short amount of time. It's really packed in, and you know, since you weren't doing anything else, you had that week to kill. I'm sure it wasn't a big deal for you, but it's another great program that I'm not sure everybody knows about that's in our CPED department.
And that is not a me-only effort. That is Mike Daniels, Lee Riley, Leanne Bullington, Rachel Bearden, Jesse Boxnick. It is a committee that represents, you know, all 4 program areas.
A lot of people out where you're visiting, right?
Absolutely.
All your
all the county
volunteers.
extension agents that help us with that. I mean, it really is a statewide and division-wide effort.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very proud of that. Kind of going along with more of the youth development, if you can call college students youth still, all of the ORAMAs.
Yeah, I made it to every ORAMA this year.
Oh, wow.
And the thing that I want to give a shout out to is everybody involved in putting on the ORAMAs because we were all over the state. Yeah. Matter of fact, the 4-H state officers, they impressed me. They were there. They wore those green jackets out that week. And not only that, but we also had a national 4-H function that was held up at Crystal Bridges. One evening, so Debbie Nessler and Ashley Dingman had to bring that group up there for that, turn around and go back, you know, halfway so they could be at the Delta District the next day. And I was kind of following along, trailing along, and made it to all of them. And so that was pretty intense, pretty intense 3 days.
Well, and it's not done yet because
That's right.
State Orama is coming up at the
Yep.
end of this month.
And I'm excited about it.
Yeah. Well, I also hear I didn't get an invitation, but I do hear that Dr. Bobbitt and his wife Susan really stepped in with our governor's award.
They stepped up, and we were unable to secure the governor's mansion for our governor award luncheon for our candidates for that award. And Dr. Bobbitt and Miss Susan Bobbitt, they were wonderful hosts there at the president's house and put on a great event.
Yeah.
And everybody seemed very happy to be there and to do it. And we just really appreciate President Bobbitt stepping in like that. He seemed more than happy to do it, and that was great.
Awesome. Well, I know the kids always love it.
Yep.
We've got a handful of some FCS shout outs that we're going to kind of roll through here. So Miller County with Tori Luker worked with her EHC group and made and donated about like 40 pillows to New Hope Cancer
Oh, that's
Institute,
awesome.
which I know whenever you're going through something like that, even what seemingly simple things like that really go a
It
long
does,
way.
and the thing about EHC, they don't just donate one. When
Oh,
you
yeah.
do something, it's always a big number. I remember when they did the masks, and it was hundreds.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so they're great about volunteering their time. Dallas County FCS agent Rhonda Best spoke at a Women's Health Week tea in Dallas County Senior Center in Fordyce, and did the EHC curriculum on learning about anxiety and depression.
Okay.
And so it's a very timely topic, I think, for today, to this day and age that we live in. This is unfortunately a problem for a lot of people, and so that's really awesome that we're involved in that.
Absolutely. And then in Polk County, Bridget Martin partnered with the Office of Probation and Parole to offer life skills lessons to some of the folks there. And, really shout out to Bridget for doing that. But we've got a lot of our FCS agents that are doing that type of work, and it's really critical to those folks that are kind of getting reintroduced into normal life after being
I haven't had
incarcerated.
the opportunity to talk to too many of those folks, but the couple that I have were very positive and appreciative of that, of people taking the time to try to help them
Absolutely.
integrate back in,
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Scott, I think we are out of time. I've really enjoyed, and we want to thank once again Matthew Davis and all the staff here at Jackson County Extension, and Doctors Barber, Foskey, and Ross for joining us and touring us around their research plots. I've had a fun but warm day.
Yeah, it's starting to get a little warm, and this has just been a real pleasure for me, because this station started with a vision over a decade ago, and when we first came up here to do this, there was just a little corner where we had some plots and we could barely irrigate, and the roads weren't too good, and now I come up here and it's amazing to see what we've done with it. So I'm very personally very proud of it, and I think the divisions should be very proud of it as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for joining us. Thank you for joining us and tuning in, and we hope that you have a great day.